Okay, I think we can start. You're muted. You're muted.
Oh, and
okay, that's good now. So do you need me to start share the screen now?
Yes, or I can start when I say CCC's mission.
Okay, let's go.
All right, good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to, on behalf of Chinese Culture Connection, to thank all of you for joining us for this town hall meeting on the night of a Friday. The Chinese Culture Connection is a 5013C nonprofit organization, educational organization, and it was founded in 1985. We relocated to Malden in 1999. It was by the invitation of the former mayor, Richard Howard, to support the growing Asian population and to be the liaison of the mainstream community. The mission of the Chinese Culture Connection is to promote intercultural harmony, strengthen the diverse community, and build bridges between American and Chinese citizens through interactive educational programs and arts. We believe education is the best way to help people to understand each other and unite us for the benefits of everyone. We stand for racial equity and social justice for all. Diffuse racism against the Asian American community and beyond is an important conversation for all of us as American citizens and residents, since we continue to confront racism in America. Our founding fathers created America as an immigrant country so that people from all over the world can come and create new life for themselves and their families. What a noble idea. Indeed, America has been and will continue to be a great country and thrive because it's a diverse immigrant population. However, the richness of our diversity also comes with a price. And as the world continues to become more interdependent, and we enjoy the bountiful global economy, it also comes with disease and among many other things. Racial conflicts and inequality, which lead to income gap, stand out among other issues. Can you imagine this? There were 3,800 anti-Asian racist reported incidents against Asian Americans just this past year alone. And there could be just as many more unreported as the one that is reported. It's 150% increased from the past year. It is very sad that we have to come together to demand respect and inclusion when this country belongs to all of us. But as they said, where there is a problem, there is a solution. Tonight, we are very fortunate to have four wonderful speakers to share some history and their insight to help us to understand why anti-Asian American sentiments continue to be an issue and plague this country for so long. The CCC is located in Malden, Massachusetts, and we feel strongly that we should enlist as many people to fight Asian racism and hate and all. To give you some background, in 1990, Malden has only 2,800 Asian residents, making the city 5.2% Asian population. In year 2000, this has increased to 7,800 Asians, or 14.5% in the city of population. But of course, now is year 2021, that it's much more I'm sure, but it's make the city one of the 10 Massachusetts, actually probably third or fourth city that has the largest Asian population in the state. We are also very pleased to have with us tonight an incredible lineup of highly effective members of government to help answer questions. The members of the panel are from all parts of the government in decision making. Excuse me. And process, and so we ask for guidance, assurance, and support for the Asian community for safety. Tonight's panel, local elected officials are Congresswoman Catherine Clark, serves the 5th District of Massachusetts, which includes Malden. She was the first elected in a special election in December 2013. And also State Senator Jason Lewis serves the 5th Middlesex District of Massachusetts, again covering Malden. And our Malden Mayor Gary Christensen, and also Chief Police Officer Kevin Morris. So first of all, because before I continue to say this, I would like to acknowledge our collaborators for stepping up and supporting this event with such short notice. As we know that this is an urgent and dire situation. So I'm just gonna read the list. American Association for Arabic Women, Asian Women for Health, ABCD, City of Malden, Civic Education Alliance, Chinese American Association of Lexington, Friends of Malden River, First Lutheran Church, First Parish Church in Malden, Lions Club International, Malden Public Library, Mass Senior Action Council, Malden YMCA, Mystic Valley Elder Services, St. Paul Church, Yen 3 Chi 4 Education Inc., MAT UMA, and of course, thanks to UMA for providing live stream on the local television. We are very grateful to have a Congresswoman Clark as the opening speaker, since she has an overlapping engagement. So we will have her speak now. Is a Congresswoman here yet? Can I see that? Do I see Congresswoman arrived yet? No, I don't hear her. All right, so I will continue to figure out the next. So Senator Jason Lewis championed educational equity and led the effort to pass the Student Opportunity Act in 2019, landmark legislation to ensure that every child in Massachusetts has access to higher quality public education. We welcome him to our panel. So if the Congresswoman Catherine Clark is not here yet, maybe we will have, should we have I will continue to introduce the speakers and then we'll come back to see if she's back yet. Then of course, our beloved Malden Mayor Gary Christensen, and he was first elected in 2012 after serving the council for 7 years. Prior to that, he was a director of the Middlesex Sheriff, and he's a lifelong resident of Malden. So he has been watching the growing Asian population all along, and he's very aware and supportive of the Asian community, thanks to Mayor. So we also like to introduce Malden Chief Police Office. Malden Chief Police Office, Kevin Morris, oversees an important operation for Malden and has enabled the community to stabilize and be safe. His department is a community-oriented that offers a variety of the investigative and preventive and community policing programs. So we seek his assistance to help ensure our citizens remain safe. Thanks to Chief Morris for stepping up and help the Chinese Culture Connection address the recent violence against the Asian community. So I would like to start from Jason Lewis to say a few words, and then we have a mayor, and then we will see when Congresswoman comes.
Thank you, May.
Yes, sorry about that. I'm really disoriented.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Great.
please.
Okay. Great. I'm State Senator Jason Lewis. Good evening, everyone. I'm so pleased to stand together with Congresswoman Clark, Mayor Christensen, the fellow members of our Malden legislative delegation, Representative Steve Altrino, Representative Paul Donato, Representative Kate Lippick-Arabedian, and many other community leaders to express our strong support for and our solidarity with our Asian American neighbors here in the city of Malden and across our entire country. In the last year, as May mentioned, we've seen a sharp and disturbing increase in hate crimes that have been targeting members of the AAPI community. And nearly 70% of these acts, despicable acts, have been committed specifically against Asian American women. I believe that this proliferation of hate is fueled by white supremacy, racism, xenophobia, misogyny, and gun violence in our communities. One of the steps that we can take here in Massachusetts at the state level is to strengthen our hate crime statute. And I'm very pleased to be supporting legislation that's been proposed by our Attorney General, Maura Healey, that will provide clearer definitions of what constitutes a hate crime and will enable law enforcement and prosecutors to better protect victims and to hold perpetrators accountable for their actions. We, I believe, must also support and promote anti-racism efforts in our communities, implicit bias training, more inclusive curriculum in our schools, better mental health supports, and many other initiatives at the local, state, and federal level to advance economic and racial justice in our communities. I want to close by reaffirming that the Malden community is safe and is welcoming for everyone, regardless of anybody's race, their ethnic background, their religion, their sexual orientation or gender identity, their age, or any disability, or any other personal characteristic. We respect and we value every single person for their fundamental self-worth and their dignity as a fellow human being. In Malden, we embrace diversity. We reject hate, we reject intolerance, and we absolutely reject discrimination and bias of any kind. I want to thank the Chinese Culture Connection for organizing tonight's forum and all the wonderful collaborating organizations. And I want to thank CCC for all the fantastic work you do every day in the community. I look forward to hearing all the terrific speakers this evening and to your questions and discussion later in the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Lewis. Now let's have Mayor Gary Christensen to say a few words.
When there are similar type events within the same week of each other, I would typically change up what I would say. But between last week's vigil and the one here this evening, there is no other way to restate the following. We stand together in solidarity with our Asian American community tonight and always. We stand with you, not only to mourn what happened in Atlanta and now New York, but to also condemn the racist violence, the rise in attacks, and the targeted racial, ethnic, and gender-based hate crimes against Asian Americans that we have seen in our communities and across our nation. We also stand together to acknowledge that all too often we are moved to make statements like this only after times of tragedy. But let me say that our support unequivocally does not stop here. Our city council and school committee both took strong stands condemning anti-Asian violence and hate crimes last year. In my office, will continue to meet monthly with the Greater Malden Asian American Community Coalition and continue to collaborate with the Chinese Culture Connection to help move Malden forward. Hate has no home here, and we are proud to be standing with you to continue our work toward creating a city where everyone feels safe and valued. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Now let's have our Chief Police Morris say. Yes, Betty, do you have I cannot hear you. Betty, you unmute yourself.
Sorry, thank you. I just want to welcome Congresswoman Catherine Clark, who is here. How you doing? It's good to see you. Good to see you. We know that you're in a tight schedule.
I'm good. Let Chief Mullis.
Okay. Yeah.
We arranged a little, so I just joined a few minutes ago. Yeah. So please.
Okay, good. We just didn't want you to zoom out without saying hi to us.
Oh no.
So is Congresswoman Clark? Yes, thank you so much for coming. So we should highlight Congresswoman. Can we highlight her instead of me?
Yep. Yeah, Kevin Mullis's group.
Okay, sure.
We can't hear you guys. Sorry. Can you unmute Kevin? Go. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. And can we highlight Chief Morris?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you get highlighted?
Oh, yes. Here we are.
Oh, very good. Excellent.
First of all, good evening, everyone. And Mayor, I want to thank you for this invitation. We've known each other a long time, going back to the 90s when you were on Highland Avenue in an office at the Emerson School, and we had many conversations about a vision for the future of Malden and the role that our very cherished, Asian community would play in that vision for the future. And there's a lot of evidence that the dedication and hard work of you on behalf of that community has shown great results. And I've become the police chief since those early times when I used to meet you when I was a sergeant. So I want to tell you that it's an honor and a privilege for me to be here tonight as the police chief. And I really wish I could be joined with the whole police department, because I could fill this room with 100 people who are all dedicated to that mission of protecting and serving all members of this great diverse community, but particularly here tonight to express our words of commitment and continued resolve toward making Malden remain what it is, a great place to live, to work, to worship, and to raise, a family. And I always ask myself, when there's a meeting like this, or a vigil, or a response to a crisis, or a tragedy, and I always say, what were we doing as a department the day before the vigil, the day before the tragedy? And I can tell you that this police department, in this city particularly, under this mayor, who I meet with once a week, who has an absolute focus on the well-being and the protection of all members of this community, it is not something that we become aware of because there is a gathering or a vigil. It's something that we pay attention to 24 hours a day. And as evidence of that, I'm joined here tonight by Sergeant Mike Powell, who is the Civil Rights Officer for the Malden Police Department. I'm also joined here by Detective Kevin Coe, who is here to provide language assistance if needed, but just also to offer some perspective to the Asian community about who we are as a police department and what our values are. I am here to tell you what I always tell people, that the Malden Police Department absolutely takes the oath that we take very, very seriously to protect and uphold the Constitution of the United States and all those who we are privileged to serve in this community. I want to say it again. This is not something that we have to play catch up on. It is something that is on the forefront of our vision and our mission each and every day, and something that we know is the highest priority and our sacred duty and honor. And I was reminded of that many times today. When I came out of my front door this morning, an Asian family lives to my right, an Asian family lives to my left, and an Asian family lives right across the street from me. When I drove around this city today, I saw many, many businesses that did not exist 20 years ago, that are Asian-owned businesses by dedicated, hardworking people. And when I went to church today at 4 o'clock this afternoon on Good Friday, I worshiped with people from all over the world. It's a great feeling, it's a great honor, it's a great privilege to be able to say that I wear a badge and I have a role in their safety, and I have a role in running a department that is so great that it is symbolic, and I think many people should look at it, especially on a day. We have Congresswoman Clark, from Washington, where a police officer died in the line of duty, protecting the Capitol. That's what we do. We do it for you, and we don't expect anything extra. It's an honor and a privilege, but I want everyone to know that we are here for you, and any way we can help you. I know there'll be questions we want to be able to answer. If anyone has any uncertainties, any doubts, or any need for guidance on how we can work together, we welcome any discussion, dialogue, and I want to thank you for that, because I don't think there's enough open dialogue, enough free speech going on right now, enough opportunity for people to be heard. And I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity tonight.
Thank you so much, Chief Morris. Now let's welcome Congresswoman Clark. We have been long waiting for you. Thank you so much for making the effort to come. I know you are so busy.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And thank you, May, for inviting me and everyone at the Malden Chinese Cultural Connection. And thanks especially to Dr. Wu, Dr. To, Dr. Shin, Senator Lewis, Mayor Christensen, and of course, Chief Mullis and the other officers who are present with him. I thank you for your continued leadership and partnership as we work together to end this scourge of hate and violence against our Asian American and Pacific Islander community members. And to all the organizations that have collaborated on this event, thank you. We have seen the horrific acts of violence that the AAPI community is facing, and they bring into stark relief the painful reality that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have been living with, not just over the past year, but in our history. One study found nearly 4,000 documented anti-Asian hate incidents in 2020. 68% of those victims were women. And we know there is much more that goes unreported. Recent events have shown a spotlight on discrimination and violence against our AAPI neighbors, but we know this is not a new phenomenon. We are coming face to face with the ramifications of decades of anti-Asian and Pacific Islander hate, from the Chinese Exclusion Act to the internment of Japanese Americans to the murder of Vincent Chin. Our nation's history of exclusion and racism dates back far beyond the start of COVID-19. But we know that in order to move forward to a more just and inclusive future, we must look unblinkingly at our past And I know I speak for every elected official with us today in saying we stand with you and we are taking action. Senator Lewis already spoke about what the state is doing to update their definition of hate crimes. And just a few days ago, on the federal level, President Biden appointed a permanent director to coordinate policies across the federal government impacting AAPIs. And he announced a comprehensive initiative led by the Justice Department to address anti-Asian violence. In Congress, I am proud to support Senator Mazie Hirono and Representative Grace Meng's proposed COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, which would speed up the Justice Department's ability to respond to anti-AAPI hate crimes while improving reporting and accessibility on the local level. The president has publicly indicated he supports this legislation, and I hope we'll be able to see it move forward quickly. But we know there is much more work to be done. New threats will emerge, and when they do, please know that I am here. And I know that many of you know my staff, Kelsey and Lewis, who are on this call. Our phones are on, and we are here to listen. And please tell us what you need. And that goes for all your representatives, Senator Lewis, Mayor Christensen, Chief Molis. Stay in touch. Let us know how we can help. I think so much about the strength of our community and that we come together not only in hard times like this, but in good times as well, to celebrate what it means to truly live in a diverse community like Malden. And as was referenced, it's the incredible small businesses. It is the cultural opportunities. It is even getting to hear Mayor Christensen speak in Chinese on occasion. But it is, I think of the words of Speaker Pelosi, who talks about, her quote is, "Diversity is our strength, unity is our power." And we are unified with you and as a community to making sure that each person in our communities are valued, that they are safe and secure, and that we truly define our neighborhoods by recognizing the diversity is that strength and all that it brings to all of our lives, and that we are only as secure as the most vulnerable among us. So I thank you for your work, for truly making a cultural connection, May, and bringing a greater understanding and improved quality of life. I am very, very proud to represent such a thriving Asian American community in my district. And I bring your stories of accomplishments and the challenges you face to the work I do in Washington. And I'm so grateful to everyone on this call representing the city of Malden for the approach you take, the caring way we look out for one another. And we know we have work to do and grave challenges that we face. But I am confident that we will rise to this moment and build back a community and an economy as we emerge from this pandemic that is stronger and even more inclusive. So thank you for having me tonight. Thank you for all the work you do. Always proud to represent Malden and this incredible community and to get to partner with you. Thank you, May.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Clark. I am so touched. I feel I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to get to know you. And from the first time you started running for state senator, I remember you came stop by to the All Emerson School building, and I at that moment I knew that you are going to be our supporters and we can count on you. And so I continue to believe in that. And thank you again that you continue to stand by our side. And so thank you for taking the time and effort to speak to us. So I know you have more things to do. Welcome to stay longer, and we will move on to with the program. And I know that some of the people who may have questions for Congresswoman Clark, if she may not be able to stay here, so that you can direct the question to us or to Senator Lewis, or whoever. If you have any particular specific questions, feel free to put it on the chat, and then we can direct the question to the right person, or answer it right here when the time for the Q&A. Thank you. So now let's have Betty help to introduce our guest speakers, our panelists, to start their conversation.
Well, I don't want to cut off anyone on any question and answer session here. So I'm really pleased that we have an incredible, really officials panel. Congresswoman Clark, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And Senator Jason Lewis, I remember standing in the corner shouting your name as well. So thank you very much for being here. And Chief Molis, that I've met in many, many different situations, official and non-official, and social associations, even at Fenway Park last summer, or 2 summers ago, actually. And I want to thank you and your sergeant for joining us, and Officer, do I refer to him as Officer Kevin Coe? Sergeant Mike Powell. Oh, can you unmute your little panel there, you guys?
Sure.
Can you unmute all? I wouldn't mind if everyone just got unmuted, if everyone wants to speak up. But
Betty,
yeah.
You can hear us now?
Yes, Chief Molis, I was speaking to you. I'm sorry if we were muted, non-communicating.
No, I heard everything you said. The praise for me, I wish was muted because it's undeserved.
Oh, good,
These
complete
people
sentence.
deserve a lot of praise. And again, I think it's a beautiful thing to have Detective Kevin Coe here, because—
Detective, thank you very much for that correction. And I was not sure, and I definitely want to be correct on this, sir.
No,
thank you.
An outstanding member of the department who could speak to many of the members of the audience in Cantonese. He's one of 5 members of the Malden Police Department who have an Asian American background, which is consistent with our diverse hiring. So
yes, and certainly we do appreciate your matching the demographics in your town. As May had quoted earlier, at one point, 2,800 people made up what percentage? 14%, or some meaningful percentage. And then now it's grown in your town. The demographics, we know, maybe you're looking at close to what some of the other towns are, Lexington and Arlington and Belmont. You might be high in those numbers as well. And certainly I think you're parallel with Quincy. So, we know from our own personal experience. I know that, Congresswoman Clark and Senator Jason and Lewis there, and Mayor Christensen, we're familiar with what it takes to make it a peaceful environment and just staying ahead of the game. And we know that it's looming around every single corner. So we truly appreciate, the support. And we're rookies at this, so we will definitely look to you for advice, right, May?
Yes. Okay, so now we should move on to the next our panelists.
Yeah. So thank you for hearing me out and let me have my 2 pieces, because there's really kind of buying time in case there were any questions. So at this point, thank you again, everyone. I'd like to introduce Dr. Wing Kai To. He is a history and assistant provost for the global engagement of Bridgewater State University. He is the former vice president of the Chinese Historical Society of New England. Thank goodness. And as a first-generation American, immigrated here from Hong Kong. His research and public service has focused on Boston's Chinese American communities. Thank you, Dr. To, for being here, and really appreciate your sharing and imparting your knowledge on a professional level. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Betty, and thank you, May, for inviting me to come to this forum. I think May first contacted my good friend, Dr. Paul Watanabe from UMass Boston, and Paul asked me to contact me so I can join this panel. And I'm also able to feel honored to be with Professor Wu at Tufts, who has been, leading the efforts for supporting Asian American students for such a long time. And I'm just using this opportunity to ask my other colleagues, Dr. Shin and Dr. Chang, to join us and from our Asian American Studies curriculum at Bridgewater State University. And actually, I can answer one of the questions that May talked about earlier about the Malden's population. I have some more recent data. Malden right now has about close to 15,000 Asians. It's about 25% of the city's population. So it's about a quarter in Malden Asians. Of course, Chinese Americans is the largest group, but there are perhaps, over 10 Asian ethnic groups ranging from, Indian, Vietnamese, the larger groups, and then, Cambodians, Koreans, Filipinos, Japanese, Pakistani, and, all nearby the communities. Talking about Asian American communities is a very diverse community. And there's, we have folks who have been here for 200 years, and we have recent immigrants who have been only here for 2 years or less. So we cannot just have one size fits all. And there are also over 40 countries in Asia. And, over half of the world's population is from Asia. So 25% of the Malden's population. As we know that, I like to thank again the senator and the congresswoman, and also the mayor and the police chief for supporting the community. But as Asians ourselves and Asian Americans, we want to give more, hear our voices and hear the voices of both the professionals, the Asian professionals who are more recent immigrants, and also some of the native Asian Americans who have been here for 3 or 4 generations, and also for the working class immigrants who have worked hard, not just to open small businesses, but also to work in, labor in, restaurants and other fields. And they are really Malden's really the satellite Chinatown community because of the orange line that goes to Oak Grove and Malden Center. And Malden's population, Asian American population, has increased so much over the last 30 years. And I think we have to think about, thank all the pioneers. And as you know, the Chinese Cultural Connection started in 1999, almost over 20 years ago. And the Greater Malden Asian American Community Coalition includes not only Chinese, but also Vietnamese and other Asian Americans, Cambodian Americans, and Filipino Americans, and so on. And I'd like to, thank the longtime community leaders like Diana Jiang, Maidu, Andrea So, Mei Hong, and Betty Chin, all of you who are here. And even though I'm not from Malden, my involvement was with the Chinese Historical Society of New England, as May said. So I've been concerned with the Chinatown community for a long time. And in terms of Malden, I think we're really talking about, both a small Chinatown and also a suburb. We're also talking about Greater Boston Chinese American community. So the needs are there for all kinds of Asian Americans. And also the discrimination is really not new, as we've been talking about for a while. Congresswoman Clark talked about the national history of anti-Chinese, anti-Asian violence, but in Boston, the Chinatown was formed about 130 years ago in the 1870s. In the beginning, in the 1880s, there was a movement to drive the Chinese out. Even though we didn't have violence like the ones in California, the Chinese felt very unsafe, and they were actually trying to kick them out in the 1880s in Boston Chinatown. In 1903, there was an incident against Chinese and tried to deport a lot of 300 Chinese out. And in the, during the Vietnam War, when the Vietnamese and Cambodian refugees first came here, they also settled in Boston Chinatown, especially the Vietnamese community. They also faced a lot of discrimination. So we have to think about that. So that's the first point, is that racism and discrimination continue for a long time. until the civil rights movement, there was a greater awareness of the Asian American community that Asians are here to stay, and people really need to respect the long history of Asian American immigration. So I think that history continued after the civil rights movement, and Professor Jean Wu can talk a little bit about that. But before I turn to her, I do think that we need to think about the importance of Boston Chinatown being a community in the middle of Boston, and Malden being a community here. And we are alongside with all the different ethnic groups living together, and really not a very isolated community. So we have to learn how to work together and live together and support each other. And not just among the Asian American community, and also among all people of color, and working with other folks in the city as well. Especially supporting the community organizations in the area, both in Malden and in the greater Boston area, to support the new immigrants, but also help the recent immigrants and the second generation and third generation Americans, Asian Americans, to feel a sense of pride about the Asian American culture. So I think we need to do more to combat against racism. So I would like to end by talking about that most of the attacks recently were against elderly population and women. So I was talking to some of my friends in Boston Chinatown who have been living here for a long time. So one of them, some of the elders set up a group called Greater Boston Asian American Seniors for Peace and Justice. And they recently put together a statement, and I'd like to read part of that because they were the ones who were the baby boom generation, and now they're the elders, and they were the supporters of the civil rights movement. And now they feel that history is repeating itself. So I just read a short paragraph of that.
Sure, and we appreciate that, Dr. Toe, and maybe we can wrap it up so we can move on to the next speaker.
So
I'm sure that
it says, who are we? We are the children of the 1950s, coming of age in the midst of the Vietnam War in the 1960s and 1970s. We advocated against that war in Asia, a war that was waged with unnecessary force and chemicals, not just against military forces, but against civilians as well. It was an immoral war, and it was a war that also had repercussions for Americans of Asian ancestry here in the United States. Returning vets from Vietnam had two reactions upon encountering Asian Americans in public, and quote, "There's a gook, let's kill him." Or to women say, "Let's go out for a drink," and more. Now we as senior citizens, it's deja vu. We are seeing a war waged against Americans of Asian ancestry in our own country. People using hateful language, bullying, using force, using lethal weapons, much of it directed at women, at the elderly, and we are scared. We feel that there's a target on our backs, and this must stop. Stop the hate, stop the scapegoating, stop the violent behavior. To our younger brothers and sisters, we seniors, thank you for your organizing efforts and your passionate advocacy to protect us as elders. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, Dr. Toe. And we'll maybe have a Q&A at the very end. I believe that's the agenda here. Next on our list is Dr. Jean Wu. She is a long-serving scholar of Asian American Studies at Tufts University, which very incredible credentials. She will be talking about the history of two most innocent stereotypes of Asian Americans that developed or got reinforced in the context of U.S. history post-1965. So this is forward moving, and how they continue to fuel anti-Asian racism and violence in this moment. Dr. Wu, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Wing Kai, especially for the the letter that you read at the end. I hope that that can be, if it's okay with the folks who sent it to you or gave it to you, that that could be made much more public and in fact disseminated. I think it is in moments of that we are in right now, where people have, I think, a lot of nuts and bolts questions about
yes.
how to keep safe and who's going to protect them. It's sometimes hard to expand our heads to think about history and what has gone on in the past. But at the same time, I think it's really critical because history is one of the most useful things in a way to help us understand our lives in the present. I think that's why both Winkai and I wanted to actually give a little bit of history. And so let me just, and I think how Asian Americans, what happens to us as Asian Americans in the past and in this moment, I think is very affected by the way that we're seen, literally how we're perceived by others, whoever they are, and also that the things that people believe about us. So I think historically and in the present, Asian Americans have not been visible in this society. Our histories and our experiences have not been considered. By that, I mean, yeah, you might be able to see us in body, but to really see somebody in the society, the histories and experiences of that group of people or of that individual has to be considered as somehow consequential, right, to what happens to society. So Asian Americans have not been in that position. There is I've been teaching Asian American studies for almost 50 years. Every year, every semester, the first thing that one of the first experiences Asian American students say about their experience in the United States, no matter where they come from or how long they've been here, is that we do not feel visible. We do not feel that we belong in this society, right? So when Asian Americans are seen, they're seen, I believe, in stereotypes. And most people understand what stereotypes mean, but they really are just images and that are or information that's given about us, but it's not by us. This is misinformation generally, not based on our realities, and they are imposed on us by dominant society, information, and media. They don't represent our truths, but they determine how we are treated by the rest of society. If an Asian American walking down the street is seen in the stereotype of an enemy alien, of somebody who someone remembers in the context of American wars in Asia, then when we see someone as an enemy, it gives us license, sometimes even a righteousness to kill them, right? And sometimes one might even feel patriotic. So how we are seen and what information people have of us is really important. I think we're very limited on time. So I'm going to have to, and I do think it's very important for a question and answer period, because most of the questions that I see have come in are all about nuts and bolts. But I just wanted to touch on two stereotypes that I think are the most common to Asian Americans, and I think are very much connected to this period. And one is, and I think these are familiar to folks once, it's not as if it's anything new. I think one stereotype, as I mentioned, is that the Asian American is always seen as a perpetual foreigner, or you could say a perpetual alien. And in times of maybe societal anxieties, political anxieties, social anxieties, just like COVID-19 recently, and in the present, that sense of being seen as a foreigner and as an alien, as not American, can easily slide into being seen as un-American and even sometimes anti-American, right? To be seen really as the enemy alien. And I use the word perpetual because it is not just a matter of opinion that someone has, but it has been really century and a half of laws and practices, policies that have designated the Asian as somebody who is excluded by immigration, and those who are here for the longest time, 61 years, I think, denied naturalization, that we were ineligible for citizenship. You cannot have decades, almost a century of that, without some part of the American psyche is embedded into the American psyche, that when you look at Asians, they somehow do not belong in the usual way that we would think of someone as belonging in the American society, someone who has, some Asians have been here for more than a century and a half. That's a longer time than a lot of other immigrants that have come.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Wu. And, you know, I'm sure this is a subject that needs much more time than here. So I just want to see, because what you're studying is so important, if there's any questions that anyone wants to put out there for you, Dr. Wu.
I can't hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. I was just saying that there may be some questions for you, and I just want to give an opportunity before we wrap it up.
Did you want me to say something right now, or?
No, I just wanted to see if anyone had any questions for you at this point, you know, because we had covered a lot.
I was keeping an eye on the Q&A list, so I don't know if the questions are arriving there. Why don't I just say what the second?
Yeah, maybe you can finish
is. Only because I feel like those.
Because the one for Roxanne is for the chief.
Betty.
Yeah, so I was just saving that one for the chief.
Okay, Betty, why don't we let Dr. Wu finish what she has to say?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, please.
Well, let me just mention the other stereotype. It is the one of the model minority, which many people know. But the history of it is that the model minority is really not about Asian Americans. It is not based on Asian American reality. Even if you know people who think that they like being a model minority, it is actually a stereotype and a lie, right? That was used as a racial kind of a tactic to pit our Asian Americans as a group against other groups of color, particularly, but also white workers and Asian Americans themselves. And this was in the late 60s at the height of the civil rights movement, when it was beginning to gain traction. And when people were beginning to say that the US really needed structural change, right, for a just society. And Asian Americans were used as a group to say, look, this group is, you know, is very successful. And they're quiet, they're not making any noise. And it basically was used to say to other groups, if you will just stop complaining, stop whining, and you get with the program, we don't need structural change. Things are working fine. And if you'll do as the Asians do, you'll be successful. What was not said at that time was that Asian Americans were about 0.2% of the population, a very small group that had really been silenced, right, terrorized into silence by the Japanese American incarceration in the Second World War and by Chinese American surveillance during the McCarthy era, right? And also a group of new Asian Americans that came post-65 that were new to this place, that did not understand American race, that also brought with them the kind of statistics of having a good education or having some capital, right? So I think it's important, because what that stereotype lands an Asian American as a group in is a kind of overall resentment, right, by Black and white, by other people, other groups in society, right, that say Asians are better than you think we are. You are better than we are. So that kind of resentment, plus, you know, and a kind of a misplaced resentment, to merge together with this idea of being a perpetual enemy, right? Those really put Asian Americans front and center, really vulnerable to the kind of and it's the nature of Asian American violence that we have to understand. It really is one about the enemy, right? It's very brutal, it's anonymous, it's faceless, it's indiscriminate, and it's very random. And on top of that, it doesn't also draw the usual sympathy, right, from a larger society that says, oh my God, how can this be happening? It took the 8 people and 6 Asian women in Atlanta being murdered to really make this situation that has been century and a half long come into the present moment. So let me just end there and say that maybe that history gives some sense of why the violence looks the way it is, and maybe to come for us as a community to come to understand and begin some conversation about our own history, and to see how we can, knowing what we know, then how do we then begin to push back and think about ways to engage.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. Thank you very much. And certainly it's a lengthy study that just will carry a life of its own. Thank you, Dr. Wu. Now for Dr. Alice Wen-Ji Cheng. Thank you very much. She is an associate professor of psychology. Her research interests are social and cultural contexts, influencing health disparities among ethnic minorities, Asian American mental health, racial stereotypes, diagnostic bias, multicultural competency, alcohol use disorders, and the psychology of white supremacy. Dr. Chen has immigrated from Taiwan to the US in 2003. She spent her formative years in Indonesia. She regards herself as a third culture kid. Thank you. Dr. Chen will focus on the impact of these stereotypes of Asian American community from a psychological perspective. Dr. Chen, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to speak after both Dr. To and Dr. Wu, because what they have said is very relevant to what I will be saying. The Asian American experience is a double bind. On the one hand, we experience racism, but on the other hand, these experiences are not validated or taken seriously. The example of the Atlanta shooting really, within a day, the narrative has shifted from a racial-based attack to basically a shooter is having a bad day and his sex addiction. And I also couldn't help but see that in this particular case, there's a victim blaming narrative that I haven't seen in other mass shooting cases. Yeah. So we can really trace these two experiences of being this double bind, experiencing racism on one hand and also being dismissed on the other, based on the two prominent stereotypes that Dr. Wu had mentioned. So the problem with stereotypes is not that it's untrue, but it is incomplete. It tells an incomplete, complex experience of a cultural group and made it into a caricature. So the first perpetual foreigner stereotype, yes, it's true. Most of us are new immigrants. In fact, close to 60% of the Asian in this country are first-generation Americans, meaning most of us are foreign-born. But the incomplete story about this stereotype is actually racism. If it wasn't for what Dr. Wu has mentioned, the racist policy that barred Asians from immigrating to this country, we would be a much larger community in the United States, because the fact is Asian population in the whole world made up about, over 50% of the population. So frankly, we would have been bigger, but it was because of these policies. So this didn't really happen by happen chance, the low percentage of AAPI population. It was systemic racism. The impact of the stereotype on us is really multifold. First, this perpetual foreigner has an impact in our own community. The new immigrants lacks the knowledge to understand these deeper systemic, historical, political issues that we all have been talking about today in this panel. We also lacked the language to understand and fight back. And second, the lack of understanding of this larger context also allows a lot of us to buy into the meritocracy myth of the American dream. We therefore ourselves dismiss, minimize, or even justify our own experiences of being discriminated. And we blame other minorities for their own failures. At the same time, we put our heads down and try harder, looking forward to be assimilated to the white normative culture. And third, this also allows us to remain as the other, as an easy target. Our issues continue to be marginalized and minimalized. As for the model minority stereotype, the story behind the stereotype is another story of discrimination. Because of what Jean discussed earlier, the immigration policy has changed since post-civil rights, and the racial quota-based immigration was no longer accepted, and so it shifted to a more merit-based immigration. And so a lot of immigrants that move to this country are more highly educated or they have capital. So this really solidified this model minority stereotype. But of course, lumping all of us together is problematic, as we have said earlier, because our immigration experiences are all different. Some came as refugees or seek political asylum, and that will really determine the experiences as an immigrant. But this particular stereotype has a deeper impact to both our community and interpersonally. So the model minority stereotype basically renders us invisible. Really, people question, how can a high-functioning, well-adjusted minority group claim or experience racism? In fact, in my own study, I found that mental health clinicians significantly dismissed and underdiagnosed diagnosable mental health problems when the patients are identified as Asians because of this particular stereotype. Also, the same stereotype can be internalized in our own community, where individuals are reluctant to seek mental health treatment, and even when they experience functioning impairment. Many seek self-coping strategies such as alcohol use or prescription drug abuse to uphold this model minority image. So in sum, both of these stereotypes, the model minority stereotype and the perpetual foreigner, contribute to the invisibility of our problems. Racism in other BIPOC communities are recognized and often acknowledge that changes need to be made. But for the AAPI community, our suffering are often invisible, and this is true within ourselves as well as within the larger community. Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Dr. Chang. It's just this ongoing conversation about it. Then we've got Dr. Yoonjun Shin. Thank you very much. Thank you. He is Associate Professor of Communication Studies and a coordinator of the International Employees Network at Bridgewater State University. He grew up in South Korea and moved to the States in 2000. He works on racial and ethnic bias intervention, which please surrender your advice on that. Civic engagement, placemaking, sustainability through his research, teaching, and service. Dr. Shin will talk about how the Korean American community is dealing with the tragedy and racism, and as well as possible solutions. Thank you, Dr. Shin. We really appreciate your time as with the others.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, my colleague, Dr. To, Yun-Kai To, who invited me to this event. And I'd like to start with my talk, with my story. So a couple of months ago, I was taking a walk in my town for exercise. Two kids, like a high school kid, they threw a water bottle at me. And they are white kids and in their car, and they kind of said like a racial slur. And my mother-in-law, who lives in California, and she was approached by people of color and verbally abused. So it's this kind of hate crime and discrimination violence is really happening in my life. So when I was asked by Dr. To and Ms. Huang about these events, I had a phone call with my Korean friends in this area, and also some Korean American leaders in this town, in this area. They all shared the same feeling of insecurity and vulnerability, because we are afraid of kind of the possible discrimination and violence from white supremacists, also from people with color. And some people, some of my friends who raise kids in the area, and they have some idea about moving back to Korea or move to other country because it's very scary to live here. And also, whenever I encounter a white, like a muscular, male guy on the street, I feel kind of very afraid. I keep monitoring their nonverbal cue, whether these are racist or not. So it's kind of scary to live here in these ages.
Yes.
And also, I think most of the people I share my talk, and they have some shared emotion and idea about this Atlanta shooting. And this is kind of wake-up call because we have been silenced for a while. But this is when after the events, I mean the shooting event, the police attitude is quite problematic. Obviously, everybody is driven by racism and misogyny, but they try to deny. It's kind of, they said he had a bad day. What a joke it is. So I think at the moment, I mean, many Asian American people lost their trust with police authority. And they think police is not going to protect our life. So I think I ask you, I mean, police authority to think carefully and seriously about these events. And many, I mean, Asian Americans are insecure and they're angry about this issue. So sometimes we feel treated like a second-class citizen. So it's not fair because we do our duty and we contribute to our in this society. So I think we need a fair treatment. And I think I mean, everybody has bias. I mean, cognitive scientists find more than 150 cognitive bias in our brain. So it's not possible to get rid of our bias. Everybody's biased. I also have a bias. But thing is, explicit bias, like expressed by kind of crime, hate crime, and violence, we need to stop by law, by strict and rigorous execution of the law. But implicit bias, everybody's an implicit bias. We need, I think, more inter-racial, inter-ethnic dialogue, more honest, more civil dialogue. We need to respect our culture. Also, we need to have some common ground. So in this ongoing, honest, and civil dialogue, we need to get some consensus and figure out some solution, the way to live together. I think that's the two way we can think of to figure out this issue together. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Shin. Now, as I'm listening to your conversation, your discussion, Dr. Shin, I also see many questions, an assortment of questions here, and May wanted to check to see if Dr. To, if you had any further comments, or any of the other speakers, any further comments before we go into our Q&A. Can you turn on this everyone's microphone rather? So Dr. To or Dr. Wu, anyone else is welcome to. Otherwise, I'm going to move forward with the questions. May?
Yes, I think the time is coming very nicely. Thank you so much for the panelists. We have so many questions, and let's see how many we can answer them. Maybe we have a few questions from the prior submission to me. So maybe I will state one, and then we can sure. Maybe we start from here. Let me read one question from you. You also have it from our receipt from Eva. So I read the first question, you do the second one, and then the third I will go into the other question that I have received earlier. So the first question will be, are the numbers of cases of reporting anti-Asian, anti-Chinese, anti-Hispanic, anti-Black, and anti-minority being targeted by the police, city, state, and nation? Is there public data we can see?
I think that what we're asking for, in a nutshell, if it helps, certainly the analytics and how far down do you break down your statistic keeping. You know, certainly now there's this such a variation. So
yeah, I don't know. This is a really good question to answer. Maybe you can go on to the next one. Or unless anyone wanted to pick a shoot on it.
I can answer that.
Okay,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a very good question, and it's also a good opportunity to reassure the public how this police department operates. We look at crime in a very, very timely manner. Every day, we go over the reports from the prior shift, and we look at them with a tremendous amount of empathy, sympathy, and consistency. And I'm gonna let you know, again, as I said earlier, we are not playing catch up. Sergeant Mike Powell is the civil rights officer. He is here to protect and defend the rights of all members of this diverse community, and he will explain to you how we look at police reports and information and the high priority that we place on them in the area of investigation, prosecution, mediation, and most of all, reassurance to victims that we stand with them, that they are not alone. And this is a very, very high priority that we place. And I'm going to let Sergeant Powell, speak to that issue. And if Detective Coe wants to speak on a perspective about how it relates to Asian crime, this is a great question because I think it's going to illustrate the values that this department has, not only in words, but something that is backed up by our everyday existence and the statistical data that we have. So Sarge, go right ahead.
Yeah, and thank you, Chief. And like the Chief pointed out, I'm the Civil Rights Officer for the City of Malden, particularly for the Malden Police Department. There's several layers of scrutiny when it comes to reports that are reported to the Malden Police Department. Anything that is hate related gets flagged, and it gets brought to my attention, not only by the Chief of Police, but also by the patrol commander and the commander of CID. So there's several layers of scrutiny when it comes to reports that come into the Malden Police Department. And every single report that has some element of whether it's a hate crime or hate incident, it comes across my desk, and I flag those incidents, and I make a log for myself that I provide to the Chief of Police when it's necessary.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you go ahead. I'm just acknowledging.
Yeah. And so I want to assure the community that it is definitely a passion of mine. Anything that comes across my desk that is hate related. There is no room for it in the City of Malden. There is no room for it in this country. And I can assure you that we're doing everything within our power to take those matters seriously for all the residents of Malden. And I hope that that comes across sincere, because it is.
And I would just like, Kevin Coe, one of my great detectives, to also give a little bit of perspective on his experience here with regard to how we look at and prioritize bias-related crimes and incidents. And I want to be very clear. We actually look at the layer below it. We don't require that a report be an absolute crime. We look at things, and sometimes if the reporting person is of a certain ethnicity, we look at any underlying component that might reveal a potential bias. So we are very, very cognizant of the things that lie under the surface. And sometimes we see somebody who may be reluctant to report because they're maybe not as aware of their victimization and maybe not aware of how receptive we will be. So I just want Kevin to kind of explain that, and he has complete liberty to speak freely. This is the way we operate, okay?
Thanks, Chief. So like going back to the reports, we leave no stone unturned. Every report gets looked at every day, so nothing really gets past us. In regards to, growing up in Malden, I came here, from, growing in Vietnam, but I moved to Malden when I was in kindergarten, so I've been here, almost 40 years. So I see a huge change in the community. When I first moved here, the street I grew up on, we were the only Asian family, and afterwards, like 15 years later, more than half the street's Asian now. So it's a huge population, and 25% of the population of Malden is Asian, but we're pretty proud to say that there isn't much anti-Asian or hate crimes against us. Like reports we look at, there is not there. Stuff we see on the news from other parts of the country, it doesn't happen at Malden. It's a credit to the people who live here for being tolerant and being inclusive, and also for I think for the department that the way we police everyone and the way we interact with each other, that there's really not much space, or people don't have that mindset to be hateful towards each other, you know.
And if I could just add something to what Detective Ko was saying, if it's occurring in Malden, it's not being brought to our attention. So, and I think that's very important for folks to understand, that regardless of whether it's a hate crime, meaning there's elements of a crime attached to somebody being targeted for a specific reason, or whether it's an incident, meaning hate speech, we still want that brought to our attention, because if we can't pursue anything on a criminal matter, it's still good for educational purposes, right? Because we like to we like to identify all parties involved, and there's an educational element to it, even if it doesn't amount to a crime. So I want folks to understand that, and that's very important, because I want to know about all incidents, not just crimes. I want to know about all hate incidents, not just hate crimes.
Right, and on that level, we have had times when a adolescent might be trending toward incidents where there could be a potential thought process that indicates maybe some bias. And that is a great opportunity for us to not allow that to flourish to the point where it manifests itself in serious crimes. So with an adolescent or a juvenile, we have had opportunities to engage those people, explain to them the consequences of their actions with regard to the pain that they cause, the hurt that they cause, and try to get them to get a different outlook on life. And one of the beauties of this police department is, with regard to bias-related crimes, we've been able, over the past 8 or 9 years, to hire, when you look at it, in a civil service environment, 38% minorities when you include women. That is a remarkable thing. That is a remarkable accomplishment, and it's an indicative of the values that the department has. And the last thing I want to say, because I think this is very illustrative of to the people of Malden about what we stand for. We talk about the scrutiny of our reports and the layers. Well, I have a layer above me too, and that's the mayor, and that's somebody I talked about earlier. We speak every day and we meet every week, and I am telling you, and everyone that can hear my voice, that this is something that is on the forefront of his priorities, and he takes a very, very strong, passionate interest in this, particularly outreach to victims and making sure that the priorities of the community are put in the forefront of the way the police department's policies, practices, and procedures, you know, deliver those services. So that was a good question, because it kind of explains how we analyze and assess things. And again, we want to ask people, please do not hold back reporting things to us. Like anything, we encourage people to let us know. Let us stand with you. Let us analyze the situation with you, and let us work with you in a way that is going to cause you to come away and tell others this is a police department that is responsive. And I will say this, many people that have come to Malden, the most diverse city in Massachusetts, from countries where for good reason people are afraid of the police, they avoid the police, because in those countries the police are to be feared, and if you go to a police station you might not ever be heard from again. So it's very important for us to be able to build a bridge with people who, by no fault of their own, have an experience or an understanding of the police that is completely separate from what we are trying to project as a police department. So, go ahead.
Thank you so much.
And if I could just add, one more thing. So I'm also a member of the U.S. Attorney's Civil Rights Task Force. So even if Malden doesn't have a resource, I can get in touch with folks that would be able to maybe provide different services than Malden can. So I also want people to know that if I don't have the answer and it's related to a civil rights matter, please reach out to me. And if I don't have the answer, like I said, I'm part of a civil rights task force with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and it's a collaboration of federal, state, and local agencies who also have resources to civil rights organizations. So if I don't have the answer, I can get the answer. So please reach out to us.
Thank you so much. We have a question says like a massive shooting is still really happening in this country on a regular basis. What are the state or the federal government is doing to stop this kind of mass shooting from happening? Would this be addressed to this state or the local level can do?
Yeah, I mean, I would say whenever there's a mass casualty incident, you know, you take Atlanta, you take Boulder, Colorado, there was something in California just yesterday or the day before. In the nation's capital today, we have, you know, somebody who takes his vehicle, runs over 2 police officers, kills one. So what we do is we get regular intelligence briefings from different sources, the federal government, state government, and they give us briefings that give us an overview of the incident itself, and they also try to point out any commonalities or any warning signs that you should be looking at. But these things, as we know, are very unpredictable, very spontaneous, and at the end of the day, they come down to a decision by a person who is motivated either by hate or some distorted motive that is causing them to act out in a way that results in tragedy. I cannot ever stand before you and say that we can absolutely be able to prevent all of these acts. However, one of the more forward-thinking ideas in policing is the mental health component. There are many people out there who are dealing with mental health issues that we deal with. So I think it's very important for police agencies to partner up with people in the mental health field, particularly over the past year where under COVID-19, there has been a serious increase on the stress levels that people have undergone. There are indications there are more mental health crisis taking place. So all of these things can sometimes coalesce into manifestations of violence. Now, one thing I will say, we are very frustrated as police officers who are out there trying to make you safe and to protect you with a criminal justice system that admittedly fails on many occasions. One of the most recent high-profile attacks on an elderly Asian female was committed by someone who murdered his mother in 2002 and was let out of prison. So, I mean, from the concept or the perspective of law enforcement, here you have somebody who is a convicted murderer, killed his mother, stabbed her to death, and now he's out on the street 19 years later, and he attacks an innocent person. So there are some areas in the criminal justice system that clearly have gaping holes in it that make people very, very vulnerable, good people, and cause people to be victims that don't have to be. And that's a challenge that we face too. But on the mass shooting thing, it's something that we look at in the aftermath as far as an analysis of what went on. Are there any local realities that we should be aware of, any tactical scenarios that we should be aware of? And we always try to look toward people that are undergoing mental health challenges that might be building up. And I would say Massachusetts has, in my opinion, some of the best gun laws in the country. That's just not an opinion that I have. It is shared by many, many people. In every city in Massachusetts, it's the police chief who is the issuing authority for a license to carry a firearm. And there are disqualifying factors. There are reasons to suspend someone's license to carry a firearm and to possess one. And all of those things are taken very, very seriously, and we look at on a regular basis. So, and again, I will tell you this meeting, you know, we have a specific topic, but I think the theme is the community gets safer when we all work together to make it a safe place for everyone. When you look at issues like mass casualty, violent episodes, the message to the community is, if you know anyone who is trending toward hate, trending toward violence, seeming to have behavioral changes that are indicative of looming violence, you can let us know. And I want to let people know something. You can call the police and give them information anonymously. No one will ever have to know who you are. I want to assure you, we take anonymous information all the time. No one has to go on record. You can be very comfortable giving us information without fearing that you're going to have to be a witness or your name ever gets revealed. So if you know somebody that you have reason to believe is trending in the wrong direction with regard to the potential for violence or a behavioral issue, or maybe they need help, that's what we are here for. That's what we do every day. That's what we have partnerships with, and that's why we rely on you. We rely on you to make this community safe.
Thank you.
Chief Mullis. Sorry. Thank you, Chief Mullis, for being a partner in this approach and working towards bring our community back to peace. I'm going to hand the baton over to May Hung right now.
So actually it's 8:30 now, 8:31, and we have still more than 10 questions to answer. So I would say, if you guys don't mind, you can stay longer. If you need to get going, you are welcome to do so. So would you be waiting to continue to answer, stay and answer questions?
We're here all night. You taste as long as you want. Daylight savings, turn the clocks back, turn them ahead. Doesn't matter to us. We love doing this.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, there's a question to say. Is the education of awareness and self-protective of hate crime available from the police, city, or state?
So the question is there any mechanism to provide people with information about how to become more protected against hate crimes? Is things like that the gist of the question?
Yes.
Yeah, a form of self-defense, if there's even, an opportunity for you to do an ad hoc class.
Yeah, I mean, we have not really gotten into the idea of physical self-defense. It's not something that I think that a police department would see as part of our mission, because we tend to encourage people to, when they sense danger, to avoid it, to call us immediately. We are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, I mean, if you can avoid the situation and call us, we're going to respond immediately and provide whatever protection you need, gather whatever information you have, and go from there. But, the best, way to protect yourself and defend yourself is by, realizing that the police department is really here for the right reason. We are really here to protect you and to serve you in any situation you're in. I mean, I don't want to let this pass without telling you a great story. One of my newer cops, Kevin Russell, came here from Stoneham, and he recently had the ability to go to a house where an Asian family was and deliver a baby. It's the greatest day of his life, the greatest day of his career. He'll never forget it. And I just think that family will never forget that on the day that the baby was born, there was a Malden cop there to welcome the child into the world. Now, that's an example of us coming to work every day and not knowing how our day is going to play out, for the good, for the bad, and the ugly. All of those realities are possible. But with regard to, being better prepared, the best thing you can do is to be aware of your surroundings, to be aware of the things, to avoid situations that you think are dangerous. And that's just kind of a common sense approach. Avoid areas that might not be that well lit, areas that you feel uncomfortable in. Although there's not many areas that are unlit, because the mayor is everywhere, and when he sees a light out, he gets it fixed right away. But, Mike, do you have any, idea of how somebody can better make themselves less vulnerable to being a victim? I think the best way you do it is by standing up for your rights. You stand up for your rights. Nobody has to stand alone. If you report something to the Malden police where you have been the victim of a hate crime or bias or anything like that, you don't stand alone. It's the Malden police, people like Mike Powell, Kevin Coe, and all of my cops who are going to stand with you. Nobody has to believe that they are alone and that they are alienated and without support. We will stand with you. One of the greatest things about being a cop is we get to stand up for people that feel intimidated, they feel bullied, they feel pressured. I understand what that's like, but I think the greatest reassurance is to know that when you come to the Malden Police Department, you're going to have a department that is sympathetic, empathetic, professional, and responsible, and do our best to get you through whatever challenge you're facing. So the idea that you're not walking alone down those streets, you're not going on your own. We're here to help you.
Sure. Chief Mullis and Mayor Christensen, certainly to your credit, your crime rate really is under control. And we do feel confident that, you know, with your sharing with us, having the combination of both your intervention approach and the diversity of your staff, we do have faith that we can count on you to support the Asian community in protecting us during this difficult time. Indeed.
Well, let's go on to the next question. Yes. Have any verbal assault and or physical batteries upon Asian residents and visitors to Malden been reported to the city police and government? If so, how did the Malden respond?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so fortunately, we haven't had any incidents related to hate crime that resulted in somebody being physically harmed. However, we have, Kevin and I actually, last year was a family that we assisted that was the recipient of what you can call hate speech. So I think how we resolve this issue again is the family originally wasn't going to report this because they didn't feel it amounted to any crime, anything that we can do. However, like I had mentioned earlier, we still want to know about incidents that involve what you would determine as offensive speech or hate speech, because we were able to proactively. So no one reached out to us, but there's a lot of scrutiny on the reports, and something was brought to the chief's attention while he was reviewing the reports. It was then brought to my attention, and we took a proactive approach in reaching out to the family that was victimized. And as a result of that, we were able to identify everybody involved and resolve the matter without it escalating. But something that I want to point out to folks is, in regards to confronting people that may offend you with words, is we don't recommend anyone antagonizing the situation. What we do recommend is reaching out to the Malden Police and let us be your voice. Let us be your voice, because we've seen incidents occur when somebody confronts somebody else and it turns to tragedy. Yeah. So we want to avoid that. That's something that we want to avoid. So the best advice, and the same advice we gave to this family that we spoke to regarding last year during some hate speech was contact us, let us be your voice, and we were the family's voice. We had a conversation with the individual that was involved, and it was an educational moment, right? It was a moment for me to reach out to these folks and let them know that you may have a First Amendment right, however, that those words can hurt people, right? And you should be cognizant of the fact that words do hurt, and words do matter, and it's so that's that educational component that I speak of.
The other good thing in this modern era too is if you're walking in a public area and you're the victim of somebody who makes verbal remarks or whatever, there's a good chance it's going to be captured on some camera. And if that incident gets reported, even if we don't know who the suspect is, then I have a great team of detectives who have a remarkable track record of going back to an area, checking the surrounding area, and getting a good image of the person that did it and help us to identify them. So I don't want people to feel that they have to right at that moment become a police officer. But as long as they can kind of remember where it happened and some general information, you'd be very impressed at how when the priority is right and the effort is there, that we can help to identify these people, these perpetrators, and make it very clear to them that our priority is to find them, locate them, and let them know that they, we know who they are. Believe
Sure.
me. Some of them are shocked when they find out, whoa, you put all this effort into finding me? That must mean that this is important to you. And it is. It really is.
Thank you, Chief Mullis, certainly.
So this is going to be for all the panelists or whoever can respond. So how to encourage Asians to participate in civil and social activism so that our voice can be heard clear and loud? Can we galvanize Asians to be activists to shatter those stereotypes? I don't know who can help to answer this question.
I can try to say something, and then maybe my colleagues, Jean, if she wants to add something. I think, all of us are trying to make sure that our students, Asian American students and younger generation feel connected to what's being wrong, and, have a sense of social justice. And, not just about our own community, but about, American society as a whole, whether you have a sense of civic, kind of responsibility about, being a member of the community. How can you help people who are less fortunate, who are less, so we need to be allies to all people who are disadvantaged in the system under systemic racism or white supremacy. We have to really make sure that our students are able to, or the working class immigrants are able to be protected, not just by the police, but also by, any policies that disadvantage against people who are are lower socioeconomic background or situations. So I think as educators, we all have our roles to play to encourage students to be more active and speak up against injustices of all kinds. I think that's a first step. Maybe Jean, you would like to say something.
Sure. I'll just follow what you said, Wing Kai. I do think it has to do with education, but I think it's a little more basic than that. I think at this moment, most K-12 schools, I would include Malden in that, because I don't know of any K-12 school that has a very solid, good, multiracial, multi-ethnic, grounded education in all the histories of all different racial and marginalized groups. In fact, one of the reasons why Asian American young people come into themselves, even into adulthood, and say they feel invisible, they don't know who they are in the context of a society that's Black and white. What is Asian American is because there is no Asian American history, really solid, grounded Asian American history taught, along with a lot of other histories that are not taught. And I think until we are able to really be serious and say that, how can we ask different groups of people who have been pitted against one another by racism in this society, how can we ask them to interact, to know, to come together, to fight for social justice when they do not know one another's histories? It is impossible, right? And it's not just knowing one group's history. It's not enough. We have to know how we are entangled over time, over this whole, as long as the US has been, right? Somebody said earlier, the US is a land of immigration. The US is made up by a lot of immigrants, but we have to remember that the US actually came about because we are sitting and living on indigenous lands, and also much of the labor that went into building the US came from a system called slavery and then came from a system called forced labor, literally. If you look at what Asian American immigrants first had to come through to do the labor in the United States and build, much of that history is not taught. So I don't see how we can go ahead and ask one another to ask our young people, unless they know this, to support one another and to support social justice. What is justice?
Sure. Dr. Wu, thank you very much for your time, and especially Dr. To. Now, just addressing this matter with Senator Lewis, if we may touch base on this. So at this point, the state government is closing up fiscal year 21 and now looking to FY 22. Is there any funding or something under consideration for funding this kind of situation, just as they provided some expansion funding for COVID related problems? So would there be some funds available to social organizations to help the Asian community to stand up to this?
Thanks for the question, Betty. And I just want to lift up what the panelists, other panelists just said in terms of the importance of the role that education plays, starting at a very young age, and developing more inclusive curriculum, supporting ethnic studies, supporting anti-racism efforts, greater diversification of our teachers and administrators is a major priority in the city of Malden, and is one across the state as well. So, we are looking at a whole range of initiatives at the state level to address racial justice, and that's across communities of color. Last year, a major step forward was taken in terms of looking at ways to make policing, improve police training and responsiveness to mental health issues like Chief Molis was talking about, greater accountability. So that was a very important step forward. But we are looking at additional resources and policies that can support anti-racism, again, in curriculum, in increasing diversification among our workforce, in our housing policies, in our environmental justice, so that we recognize that this is systemic and it's across all aspects of our communities and our society that affects our Asian American residents, also other residents of color as well.
Sure.
And this has to be a top priority.
Yeah. Senator Lewis, if you're not going to toot your own horn, I'm going to toot it for you, certainly. Certainly the Student Opportunity Act in 2019 really was based on educational equity, and the community greatly extends its appreciation to you. And we hope that you continue the good work as well, and bringing the bacon home to your area and your district. Appreciate that tremendously. Thank you. And we know that Mayor Christensen just as well has been very in tune to his community, having been a long life resident, just as Chief Molis was, and bringing in such a diverse staff. It's quite impressive. And we wanted to, if you had a suggestion to work with the Asian community, what would you suggest at this point, how we should handle it?
I think we keep doing what we've been doing, which is to keep the lines of communication open and work together. And I'm not alone in that thought process. On the call tonight, we have city councilors, Barbara Murphy, Peg Crow. I see Adam Weldy from the school committee. And so, as I mentioned in my remarks tonight, we just don't do this during a time of crisis. I meet every month, as I was mentioning, with the Greater Malden Asian American Community Coalition year round to try to find ways that we can continue to move our city forward. And then I don't think there needs to be anything said more between the Chinese culture connection and our community. Just last week, when we were putting together our Community Development Block Grant, which is an annual budget appropriation, thanks to our partners in the federal government, the Chinese culture connection is in that budget proposal. So I think it's those sorts of things, that will help us get to where we all want to go to.
Certainly. And you know what we've seen, you know, with through funding sources, because, you know, that speaks volumes, and is that the funding and the working with your community, and certainly between Chief Moles' department and your department, we've seen great economic stability in your town for sure. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
So I have many more questions, but I know the time is very short. We need to end at 9 o'clock. But there's one long question, so we can. I'm not sure who is going to address this. I'm going to read this and see someone can respond to it. Dr. Wu's work regarding Asians being perceived as foreign and as outsiders is still alive and well in modern today. My Asian multicultural child showered a family portrait to her class during remote class lessons. She was asked, "Where is your white mother from?" And then, "What country is she? Is your dad from?" It would be easy to say that this instance is an individual problem, but it is absolutely untrue. This represents a stereotype, a systematic problem that mostly white female teachers do not have the education that their Asian students are from modern and belonging here. This hurtful stereotype shocked my child, as she knew her dad was not an outsider, and this heroic serves to damage the students-teacher relationship. Modern K-12 population is 25% Asian, but her school, the BB school, 40% teachers' assumptions about where Asian students are from need to be reminded and remedied. What is being done specifically to teach teachers who the modern K-12 population is? It should not be on the families to address this at an individual level.
I could try to respond to that, May. First, what I would say, I don't agree it should not be on the families to address this on an individual level. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to work together to try to help move us forward. So the question I would have here is, was it reported? And if it was it addressed? But I do know beyond that, what we have to do, and again, we have several elected officials on the call, it starts with us. So just this past summer, we took a 2-day anti-bias training, which we are now going to do on an annual basis. And I know our teachers are doing the same thing every September when they come back in. So, and then I think the most critical thing we have to do, and it's going to take time, is to start reflecting what our community is in all levels of the government. So that is starting to happen, thanks to everyone on this call and in our community. Just recently, we had no principals of color. We have 3. We had 3 administrators of color. We have 9 out of 25, I believe it is. And during the last 2 years of teacher hiring, we've been between 20 and 25% of the hires people of color. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's just, we're making progress. We're obviously not where we want to go, but totally. But I think the steps that have been taken, you know, Chief Moles said it within his department. Just down the hall from us, Betty, we have our first diversity, equity, and inclusion officer for the city, who is working full-time.
That's wonderful.
Try to help us. And, you know, again, I was telling you, Adam Weldye's on the call from the school committee. We're going to have one as well for the school department in the new fiscal year. So they'll have their own diversity officer.
I applaud you, Mayor Christensen. Certainly, it's very much appreciated by the community, and especially you understand the analytics and the demographics of your growing Asian community. And you certainly know, you know, wherever there's injustice and violence, you know that it's like a cancer. So thank you very much from the Asian community.
Betty or May, this is Senator Lewis. Can I also just share a thought here?
Yes, please.
Great. So the Malden Public Schools are really one of the leading districts in the state in trying to think about how to have more teachers of color, administrators of color, even starting a program with high school students of color that are interested in maybe going into the teaching profession and, and then coming back to Malden. So we've been looking at that and looking at best practices in some other parts of Massachusetts. And we have a proposal at the state level, which we are going to be evaluating in the Education Committee in the coming months, which I'm very excited about. And it would be an initiative to encourage students of color, Asian American students, Black students, Latino students in high school to think about the teaching profession and then support them on that path while they're still in high school. Then to help make them successful in college, so that they will again continue on that path. Also to provide alternatives to the licensing system we have today, because there's a lot of evidence that disproportionately hurts students of color who need to get a license as teachers. So we've got some ideas to provide alternatives. And then importantly, we have to make sure we support them once they're hired in a district, because unfortunately we don't see as good a retention rate for teachers and administrators of color in our public schools as we do for white. And there's a variety of cultural reasons for that, and that they're not getting the support they need. So we're looking at it end to end, and I'm actually feel quite optimistic this is going to be one of the high priorities in our state legislative session this year. So
yes,
that work.
It certainly is welcoming news. Thank you very much, Senator Lewis. And thank you, Senator Lewis, for being here with us, and especially the panelists and Mayor Christensen, definitely for your valuable time. Thank you indeed, sir. And Chief Molis, Sergeant Powell, and Detective Coe, thank you very much for your time. And this is valuable, and we will be in touch with you, Mei Hung, and Chinese Cultural Connection, because certainly we want to have a peaceful community as well. So thank you. We're working as a team. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Senator Lewis.
Well, since there are so many questions, maybe we'll send the questions to you guys and we can answer them to them, because some of them are very sensitive and may not necessarily to be a good question to ask here. But there's similar to what was read earlier about those school committees also have some less culturally sensitive in terms of a representation of the community schools. And so that's something was also asked about, what if the school committee members been trained, or if this is something that can be dealt with. Perhaps I can read a question and you don't have to answer it now because we have to end.
I think I saw the question. Maybe I could just react to it a little bit.
Sure.
I think all the biases and, in the schools and among the teachers, I think it's not just the job of the government to deal with that. It's the parents and the Asian American organizations should play a larger role in, supporting more education or anti-bias training and workshops for the teachers. So I think Asian parents, sometimes they feel, powerless and not being very vocal to complain or to talk to the authorities. You can see that today is the government and the police talk most of the time, and the committee voices don't really speak up as much about, some of their problems. So we cannot just think that even though we're doing a good job, relatively speaking, in Malden, we have to look at what are the issues about bias, discrimination, and, misunderstanding of the Asian American community. So like Jean and Alice said, that the implicit bias and the microaggression and the racism are hurtful to the kids and hurtful to the younger parents and the immigrant parents. So they need to really educate them, and also hurtful to the multi-generation Asian Americans with the perpetual foreigner kind of stereotype. So there's a lot of education that needs to be done, a lot of dialogue that needs to take place, at the local level. So I think the school board needs more Asian representations. Chinese Culture Connection needs to do more. It's nice to put up a Chinese New Year or teach Chinese culture, Chinese art. It's another thing to really get deeper into the social justice issues. about the Asian American community. So I think the Asian American Coalition Caucus can do a little bit more and work with the universities and colleges and school districts here and try to provide this kind of training and dialogue. And hopefully more Asian Americans are more active in the future, and we can all talk to each other about that.
Thank you, Dr. To.
I just want to add one thing to what Wing Kai is saying. I think when it comes to how our students and our students' families have sort of experienced their schooling, I think it's extremely important for, yes, it's important for a school system to begin to think about who's teaching their children. Therefore, increasing the diversity of teaching population is important. But most teachers go through what's called teacher training. And most teacher training programs are incredibly behind in really helping teachers get all the basic grounded knowledge, histories of all groups, realities of all groups. So I am working, at the moment, I am working with a group of Asian American educators. Some of them are veteran educators, and they've been teaching for years. And yet our work with them, our training for them is how to actually work with their own, how to support their own Asian American students. And the first thing that we understood, the first thing we got was that we don't really know our history. Some of them have been teaching for 10 or 15 years, but they also did not get the training, right? They didn't get their own history in school. Then they go to teacher training programs don't help them and give them that information, right? So I think maybe school systems, those of you who care, parents who have the voice. Remember, a lot of immigrant parents may not have the voice or the language to be able to push us hard, but to come together as a group, you got to put pressure on the people who are sending you teachers to say, we don't want your teachers unless they can, unless they have this basic education. It's systemic, right? It's systemic.
I agree with you, Dr. Wu, and I believe that, many of the panelists and the attendees will concur, and certainly, hopefully this will motivate things. And some of the actionable items that we have discussed on a preliminary basis is touching base with our legislative representatives, such as Senator Lewis, and our local elected officials, such as Mayor Christensen, and certainly the dynamic, and I genuinely mean that, Chief Mullis and his staff, and I'm very impressed, and I believe that you are putting the energy towards it. Thank you, sir. Yeah, thank you. And
one last thing, if there are any police questions that came your way, May, you have my email address.
Yes, that's what I'm going to conclude that. I'm going to include all that.
Send me those questions, and I want to thank you for this opportunity. Dr. Wu mentioned it's bad to pit people against one another. That should not happen. Nobody should be pitting the police against the community. And we are here to help you. We invite you to join us to make this a great city as it is now. And I can't thank you enough for the free, open discussion that happened tonight. Tremendous.
We share the sentiment, sir. Thank you very much. Senator Lewis, thank you. Mayor Christensen, thank you very much. And our panelists, our esteemed panelists, thank you very much. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to just say a few words to wrap it up. So I want to thank you all the participants and the questions that you all posed on this in this dialogue. And I would like to once again thank you our panelists and of course our elected officials to really spend your Friday night with us. And I feel that there is so much conversation need to be taking place. So I will be proposing to have a more dialogue. It could be just open for people to share their experiences and whatever good and bad. And I feel that this is important for us to really get to know what's on people's minds so that we can come together to find common ground, and so that we can all be coexist in a very happy and celebrate diversity instead of elbowing each other and misunderstanding each other, so make the whole life very miserable. So I would also like to quickly thank our collaborators again, and then we have many people working behind the scene, and thank you Maple Jo for being a Mandarin translator. She is a professional Mandarin translator, and I would like to thank you, Betty. And also, I wanted to say that happy Passover, which is done today or tomorrow, and then happy Easter. And I also know I would like to acknowledge that Ramadan is coming probably next Monday. So have a nice weekend. Thank you so much for your participation. And again, we're gonna answer those questions and post on our website. That we're going to create a page to respond all this. We will send those questions to all the panelists and elected officials tonight, and then they then respond to that. So once we gather all this, we'll post on our website so that you can come to check it out, or email us if you already know. Once again, thank you so much for all your time and interest in having this dialogue. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.